Welcome, dear listener, to the beginning of our journey through the rise of Persia. Let your mind drift back in time over 2,500 years ago to the arid lands east of Mesopotamia. In these lands of dust and sun, the seeds of an empire were quietly taking root. This is the story of Cyrus the Great, the humble son of a tribal ruler whose vision, courage, and wisdom would one day shape the foundations of one of the greatest empires the ancient world had ever known. Close your eyes and picture the rolling plains of ancient Persia, where horses graze beneath crimson sunsets and caravans wind through dry riverbeds like whispers in the sand. In this chapter, we explore the early life of Cyrus, his unexpected rise, and how his bold spirit set in motion the legacy of the Achaemenid Empire. Let us begin gently. We return to the Persian plateau, where sunrise spills gold across windswept ridges, and the world waits for a humble prince to change its fate. Cyrus was born in Anshan, around 600 BCE, a minor court surrounded by higher mountains and greater powers. Raised by his mother, Mandane, and his father, Cambyses, he learned early that diplomacy mattered as much as the sword. Median envoys visited often. Their king, Astyages, Cyrus's own grandfather, ruled most of Iran with a heavy hand. A prophecy reached Astyages, but a grandson would topple him, so the infant Cyrus was secretly condemned to die. Yet the royal herdsman charged with the deed spared the child. The boy grew among shepherds, mastering horsemanship, archery, and the harder lessons of hunger and sand. When his true lineage was revealed in adolescence, Astyages tried to contain the danger by keeping Cyrus at court as a favored hostage. Instead, the prince earned allies among Median generals, winning loyalty through fairness, not bribery. By his late 20s, Cyrus returned to Anshan, crowned by Persians who felt ignored by Median rule. He forged alliances with nearby tribes, promising predictable taxes and respect for their local gods. In 553 BCE, he declared open revolt. Many Medes deserted to him, disgusted by Astyages' brutality. 3 pitched battles followed, at Herba, Pasargadae, and finally at the Median capital of Ecbatana. Cyrus's tactics combined swift cavalry flanks with negotiated surrenders. He preferred prisoners to corpses. The fall of Ecbatana shocked the region. A vassal had overturned a suzerain without a massacre. Cyrus offered Astyages honorable retirement rather than execution, sending a signal that mercy could serve politics. With Median officers now serving Persian banners, Cyrus next secured the east, pacifying Bactria and Sogdia by confirming local aristocrats in power. He then marched west toward Lydia, whose king, Croesus, was famed for riches and arrogance. Historians debate whether the Delphic oracle misled Croesus, yet the clash at Thymbra in 547 BCE ended Lydian independence. Cyrus spared Croesus, appointing him advisor, a pattern of integrating conquered elites, not erasing them. The richer conquest was Babylon in 539 BCE. Cyrus crossed the Euphrates at night after diverting its flow. Babylonian priests, angered by their own king, Nabonidus, opened gates. Tablets record the city fell without street fighting. In his famous Cylinder, Cyrus proclaimed he came to relieve the people from forced labor, an early piece of state propaganda and perhaps genuine policy. He allowed deported Hebrews to return to Jerusalem, funding the rebuilding of their temple, earning praise in biblical. Administratively, he divided territory into satrapies, yet limited each governor with itinerant auditors, Objective historians note Cyrus was no saint. Revolts in Arabia and Central Asia were crushed ruthlessly. Casualties are unrecorded but not light. Still, compared with Assyrian terror, his approach of negotiated loyalty proved more sustainable. By 530 BCE, his empire stretched from the Aegean to the Indus, the largest yet seen. Cyrus died fighting nomads on the eastern frontier. His tomb at Pasargadae remains stark and modest, a stone echo of the restraint he often preached. With the Medes pacified and Cyrus triumphant, the world expected the usual cycle of tribute and terror. Instead, the new Persian king began to build something unprecedented, an empire designed to last. His first task was healing. Cyrus sent proclamations across the mountains and deserts, promising that local gods would be honored and that temples ruined by war would be rebuilt. For conquered peoples accustomed to Assyrian cruelty, such mercy felt revolutionary. He reorganized his growing lands into satrapies, administrative provinces each overseen by a trusted governor. But governors were watched by roving auditors who reported directly to the king, a clever balance of power that discouraged rebellion without constant garrisons. Next came the royal road. Engineers and laborers cut and graded a route from Sardis on the Aegean to Susa near the Persian heartland, over 1,600 miles of packed gravel and stone outposts. Couriers on fresh horses could cross the continent in less than 10 days. Coinage followed infrastructure. Lydia had pioneered stamped gold, and Cyrus adopted the practice, issuing weighed silver ingots that would evolve into darics under his son. For merchants, a standard medium of exchange turned risky caravans into reliable businesses. Yet, Cyrus was still a conqueror. His army, famous for composite bows and swift cavalry, rolled westward against the Lydian king Croesus. At Thymbra in 547 BCE, Cyrus feigned retreat, then enveloped the gilded Lydian chariots. Croesus survived, but his kingdom did not. Legend says Cyrus kept Croesus at court as advisor, and Croesus, wise at last, counseled moderation. Whether tale or truth, Cyrus indeed governed Lydia mildly. Local counselors retained office. The oracle at Delphi received lavish gifts, securing Greek goodwill. The richest prize, however, lay beyond the Euphrates. Babylon, ancient even then, suffered under Nabonidus, a king who neglected sacred festivals. Priests and merchants invited Cyrus to intervene. In October 539 BCE, Persian sappers diverted the river, and soldiers marched through the lowered channel while Babylonians slept. The city fell in a single night. There was no sack, no burning library. Clay tablets even note the next morning's workers received full rations. On the famous cylinder, Cyrus declared himself chosen by Marduk to restore justice and free the oppressed. Among those freed were the Judean exiles. Allowed to return to Jerusalem, they would remember Cyrus as a Messiah, ensuring his name lived on in biblical texts millennia. By the time Cyrus marched east to secure the Oxus frontier, his realm stretched farther than any in history. Caravan bells rang from the Indus Delta to the stone quays of Phoenician Tyre, and still the king slept beneath canvases among soldiers, rising before dawn to hear petitions. The empire's soul was mobility, a ruler who traveled, roads that reached everywhere, and laws soft enough to bend without breaking. Cyrus died in 530 BCE, battling nomads. His tomb at Passagadei remains simple. 6 stone steps and a gabled chamber. Visitors wrote that flocks grazed undisturbed nearby, a living metaphor for governance by restraint. Power now passed to Cambyses, then to Darius, who would expand and embellish. Yet every future triumph traced back to these foundations: satrapies, roads, silver weights, and the audacious idea that diversity could be a strength, not a threat. Tonight, as desert winds brush silent columns, imagine caravans glittering under moonlit skies, and the hum of many languages sharing one roadway. This was Cyrus's gift, a world newly stitched together, bound not only by fear, but by purpose. The death of Cambyses left Persia briefly adrift. A usurper seized the throne by claiming to be Cambyses' brother. Within months, the lie collapsed, and a new figure strode onto history's stage: Darius, a distant cousin of Cyrus and commander of the royal guard. Darius secured power in 522 BCE after racing his horse through the gates of the royal palace at dawn. The story says his stallion neighed first, winning an omen proclaimed by priests, yet the real victory came from swift alliances and sharper blades. Once crowned, Darius confronted chaos, rebellions in Babylon, Media, and Egypt. Instead of endless campaigns, he divided the realm into 20 satrapies, each taxed in silver talent quota. Satraps gained wide latitude, but the king's eyes and ears, secret inspectors, traveled constantly, reporting treason before it bloomed. To bind provinces, Darius expanded Cyrus's royal road. From Susa to Sardis, mounted couriers galloped relay posts covering 1,600 miles in a week. Herodotus marveled, "Neither snow nor heat nor darkness stays these messengers." Centuries later, Rome would imitate the system. Economic reform followed. Darius introduced the gold daric, stamped with a bow-wielding king. Combined with standardized silver siglos, the daric fueled trade from the Indus to the Nile. Tax archives show caravans now paid predictable tolls instead of random bribes. We must credit Darius as a builder. Near modern Shiraz, he raised Persepolis, a ceremonial capital of terraces, audience halls, and staircases carved with tribute-bearers from every nation. At spring equinox, the king welcomed delegations beneath cedar ceilings inlaid with lapis. Greek visitors gasped at columns soaring like clustered lotus stalks. Yet Persepolis was not merely vanity. It embodied imperial ideology, unity through diversity etched in stone relief. But empire invites friction. In 499 BCE, Ionian Greeks under Persian rule rebelled, torching Sardis. Darius crushed the revolt, yet anger lingered. He ordered a servant to whisper at each meal, "Sire, remember the Athenians." In 490 BCE, Persian fleets landed at Marathon. Athenians, outnumbered 2-1, charged and broke the invaders. The defeat stung, but perspective matters. From imperial Susa. When Darius died in 486 BCE, The empire stretched farther than the span of sunrise to sunset in a single chariot ride. His tomb at Nakhshe-Rustam shows the king atop a platform, arms raised to Ahura Mazda, the god of moral order he strove to reflect. He left to his heir, Xerxes, a machine of governance, a highway of stone, and coffers of stamped gold. Yet he also left a spark of vengeance that would ignite the Greco-Persian wars to come. Tonight, picture Persepolis, lit by 1,000 oil lamps, columns casting long shadows, while envoys lay gifts at the silver-shod throne. In that glow, we see the empire at its brightest hour, an edifice of policy, roads, and vision, still whispering across time. When Darius died, the empire passed to his son Xerxes, a king taller than his courtiers and burdened with unspent vengeance. Xerxes inherited a machine of governance and roads of stone, but also his father's oath to punish Athens for Marathon. He spent 4 years gathering forces from every satrapy, Scythian archers, Egyptian marines, and Persian immortals with gilded spears. Engineers built a double pontoon bridge across the Hellespont. When storms tore it apart, Xerxes ordered the sea whipped, a gesture both theatrical and terrifying. In 480 BCE, his host, Herodotus claims 1 million strong, crossed into Europe. Modern scholars suggest 200,000, still enough to darken valleys with dust. The first clash came at Thermopylae. 300 Spartans and 7,000 allies blocked the narrow pass for 2 full days, their bronze shields absorbing arrows like rain on oak leaves. A local traitor showed Xerxes a goat path. Surrounded, the Greeks fought to the last. Leonidas fell, but his stand became legend, a spear thrust into Persian pride. Xerxes marched south, torching Athens's empty temples, yet the navy mattered more. At Salamis, cramped straits nullified Persian numbers. Greek triremes rammed and boarded until the great king watched sails burn from his gilded cliffside throne. The empire's prestige cracked. Xerxes withdrew most troops, leaving a satrap to finish a war already lost in morale. A year later, at Plataea, Persian infantry broke and ran. Objectively, the defeats were border engagements. Persia still stretched from Libya to the Indus, but for the first time, subjects whispered that the empire could bleed. Back in Susa, Xerxes shifted focus to architecture. He completed Persepolis' Hall of 100 Columns and dug canals linking Nile to Red Sea. A king seeking legacy in stone, when glory at sea had failed. Greek poets painted him a tyrant. Persian tablets tell of ration distributions and temple grants. Truth balances between propaganda and polemic. Strategically, the wars stopped Western expansion. Persia pivoted east, cultivating trade with India and stepping back from Aegean turbulence. Culture, however, flowed both ways. Greek artisans copied Persian jewelry. Persian nobles hired Greek doctors and architects. Conflict birthed exchange. Xerxes was assassinated in 465 BCE, amid palace intrigue. His empire endured, yet internal fractures widened. Satrap rebellions, court murders, fiscal strain. Still, the great king's road system thrived. Envoys could ride from Sardis to Susa in a week, the arterial miracle unbroken by defeat. Tonight, picture the silent Hellespont under starlight, where broken pontoon chains sink beneath black waves. Empires may rise on ambition, but they pivot on narrow straits and human resolve. The clash with Greece reminds us, power is more than numbers. It is will, terrain, and the unpredictable courage of the few. And so, with the embers of burned temples cooling behind us, we turn toward the empire's twilight, when new storms gather beyond Persian horizons. After Xerxes, Persia remained vast but uneasy. Successive kings, Artaxerxes I, Darius II, Artaxerxes II, kept the machine humming, yet each reign added cracks to the marble facade. Court life thickened with intrigue. Eunuchs brokered marriages, queens plotted from behind embroidered curtains, and poison vials traded hands as naturally as wine cups. Satrapies, once content with autonomy, began to hunger for independence. In 404 BCE, Egypt revolted. By exploiting Nile marshes, Egyptians drove Persian garrisons out and crowned a native pharaoh. In Anatolia, satrap Pisuthnes minted his own coins. Others followed, scenting weakness. The great kings sent armies, but distance dulled authority. Greek mercenaries became the empire's double-edged sword. Cyrus the Younger hired 10,000 hoplites to seize the throne from Artaxerxes II. They reached Cunaxa in 401 BCE. Cyrus died in the first charge. Xenophon's famous retreat of the 10,000 exposed Persia's soft interior. Greeks marched home unmolested across 500 miles. At court, Artaxerxes II survived 45 years by pitting rivals against rivals, an art of balancing daggers above silk carpets. Taxes rose to fund civil wars no subject understood. Religious tension simmered. Zoroastrian reformers scorned lavish rituals. In the East, new syncretic cults blended local gods with Persian angels. Unity frayed like old embroidery. Economically, silver shortages forced debased coinage. Merchants hoarded gold, slowing trade. Satrap Mausolus of Caria funded grand tombs rather than tribute. His mausoleum, a warning carved in marble. Meanwhile, far north, Philip of Macedonia reorganized peasant farmers into a phalanx of 22-foot pikes. At Chaeronea in 338 BCE, Philip and his teenage son Alexander smashed the united Greek city-states, clearing a path east. Persia watched, but did not strike. Resources drained into internal policing. By 336 BCE, Artaxerxes III was poisoned. Court eunuch Bagoas placed a puppet on the throne, then murdered him months later. Darius III finally emerged, brave but inexperienced. He purged conspirators, yet the empire's arteries were clogged with distrust. Objectively, Persia still outmanned Macedonia 10-1. Its treasuries held more silver than all the Aegean polis combined. But morale cannot be weighed like bullion. Caravan routes reported bandit attacks where once royal patrols rode. Couriers carried tablets warning satraps to muster troops. Many delayed, calculating which side to favor. Tonight, imagine Persepolis' torchlit halls echoing with distant festivities while, beyond the Zagros passes, Macedonian scouts sketch Persian roads under a moonless sky. The empire seemed eternal, yet eternity depends on vigilance. Persia's greatest enemy was no longer Greece. It was complacency seeded by decades of quiet decay. In the hush before the storm, Earth quivers in ways only the watchful notice. Asia would soon feel the footsteps of a conqueror whose ambitions matched Cyrus, but whose impatience outpaced Darius. This is the calm before Gaugamela, the uneasy stillness where an empire wonders whether the future belongs to its heirs or to an approaching thunder of hooves. In Macedonia, Philip's sudden death in 336 BCE placed a 20-year-old king upon the throne. Alexander, bright as a sword just whetted, tutored by Aristotle, tempered by war. To secure Greece, he razed Thebes, save for poet Pindar's house. Rebellion silenced, he turned eyes east, where Persia's gold financed Greek mercenaries. Crossing the Hellespont in 334 BCE with scarcely 40,000 men, Alexander visited Troy, offering sacrifice to Achilles, signaling he would fight under mythic patronage. The first test came at Granicus River. Persian satraps lined the banks with cavalry. Alexander forded amid arrows, spearing commanders, breaking the Asian line before dusk. Cities of Asia Minor opened gates. At Gordium, he sliced the fabled knot with his sword, declaring fate belongs to the bold. Darius III gathered a grand army at Issus in 333 BCE. Terrain betrayed him, narrow plain funneled numbers. Alexander's companion cavalry smashed through the center. Darius fled, leaving chariot and family. At Tyre, a 7-month siege followed. Engineers built a causeway across open sea while Persian ships burned. Tyre fell. Survivors sold. Message sent. Egypt welcomed the conqueror as liberator from satrap rule. At Siwa Oasis, priests hailed him son of Zeus Ammon, a title he accepted with regal calm. But empire stands or falls in Mesopotamia. In 331 BCE, on the dusty fields of Gaugamela, Darius deployed scythed chariots and war elephants. Alexander angled his line, drew Persians off balance, then drove a wedge to the king's banner. Once more Darius fled. This time his satraps lost faith. He was murdered near Ecbatana by Bessus, a kinsman hoping to negotiate. Alexander pursued, held a royal funeral for his fallen rival, and proclaimed himself King of Asia, adopting Persian dress and court ritual, pragmatism cloaked as respect. He entered Persepolis. Treasury fire consumed cedar roofs and painted murals. Accident, symbolism, or drunken revenge remains debated. Flaming beams illuminated columns like tombs of light. Objectively, Persian resistance persisted in the east. Satraps in Bactria fought guerrilla campaigns. Alexander married Roxana, forging alliances, yet subdued opposition with winter marches across icy passes. Scholars note Persian administrators were largely retained. Greek became language of officers, Aramaic of clerks, Old Persian of ritual, a polyglot bureaucracy. Economy shifted. Royal derricks melted into mass, yet empire born in velocity strains under pause. Veterans longed for home. Macedonian nobles chafed at Proskynesis, the Persian court bow. Alexander died in Babylon, 323 BCE, feverish after a night of planning Arabian conquests. He was 32, youthful as Cyrus, restless as the desert wind. His generals carved territories. The Achaemenid lineage ended, but its administrative sinew outlived it, guiding Seleucids, Parthians, even Romans who copied satrap ideas. Tonight, as moonlight silvers broken columns, recall that empires do not vanish. They transform, carried forward in lore, language, and lingering stones, but glow beneath the stars. Empires fall, yet ideas travel farther than armies. When Alexander's generals carved territories, they inherited Persian roads, satrapies, and the habit of ruling many tongues under one crown. Seleucus kept the royal road. Ptolemy in Egypt adopted Daric-style coinage. Even Rome, stern and pragmatic, studied Persian courier relays before building its own cursus publicus. Religiously, Zoroaster's vision of cosmic struggle seeded concepts later echoed in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. A judging God, moral dualism, and a final reckoning of souls. Politically, Cyrus's cylinder, clay yet unbroken, survived in Babylonian earth until modern spades revealed its cuneiform charter of mercy. Today, the United Nations displays a replica as early human rights testimony. Architects borrowed limestone columns and bracket capitals. Achaemenid double-winged motifs adorn Central Asian mosques and even Georgian monasteries. In language, Old Persian faded, but Aramaic scripts it standardized, migrated along Silk Roads. Bureaucratic ink outlived marble. During the Islamic Golden Age, Persian scholars like Ibn Sina and al-Biruni wrote in Arabic, yet preserved pre-Islamic astronomy and medicine within their treatises. Epic poets revived memory. Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, finished in 1010 CE, retold Cyrus and Darius in 50,000 couplets, gifting post-Arab Iran a heroic identity. Across India, the Mughal court adopted Persian as lingua franca. Miniature painters illustrated Rustam's battles beside Quranic calligraphy, cultures intertwined, not eclipsed. Objective historians note darker legacies: forced labor for canals, heavy tribute on farmers, and palace intrigues that inspired later absolutism. Yet, without Persian administrative precedent, later vast states might have fractured sooner. Unity by tolerance proved more durable than unity by terror. In modern Tehran, schoolchildren still excursion to Pasargadae, standing small before Cyrus's tomb. Some leave flowers, others snap selfies, acts equally of memory and modernity. Meanwhile, in Western universities, law students debate whether the cylinder truly represents rights or royal propaganda, proof that ancient policy still sparks present discourse. Tonight, as you rest, picture the stone steps of Pasargadae cool under moonlight, inscriptions weathered yet legible, impermanence and endurance sharing the same block of quartzite. Persia teaches us that while borders shift, the architecture of governance, art, and story can bridge millennia. Over the past hours, we have watched Persia rise in dust and blaze in marble, felt its banners snap in foreign winds, and seen its memory carried by poets and pilgrims. Now, dear listener, we stand amid twilight ruins where silence speaks louder than trumpets. Imagine walking the processional way of Persepolis after sunset. The columns loom like sentinels. Worn reliefs still parade Medes, Egyptians, Babylonians, ambassadors frozen mid-stride, their carved gifts eternal. A breeze drifts through broken doorways, and for a heartbeat one might hear the faint echo of sandal on limestone, the murmur of Aramaic clerks tallying tribute. History is often told in battles, yet endurance is measured in the quieter intervals. A road repaired, a treaty honored, a shrine left standing by a victorious army. Persia's greatest achievement may be this lesson of tolerance, a recognition that empire cannot weld diversity by iron alone. Centuries after the Achaemenids, medieval travelers still used Persian milestones. Renaissance maps traced caravan routes laid under Darius. Modern engineers study Connaught irrigation tunnels first dug by anonymous imperial laborers. Step closer to Cyrus's tomb at Pasargadae. Simple, unadorned, it rises on 6 stone steps beneath open sky. Alexander paused here, legend says, and wept. The inscription, if it ever existed, is lost, yet later writers preserve its words. O man, whoever you are and where you come from, I know you will come. I am Cyrus, who won the Persians their empire. Do not grudge me this bit of earth that covers my body. Even in death, the king addressed strangers with humility, an ethic rare in conquerors. Look east and see the Zagros glow under moonlight. Caravan bells fade into distance. Their copper notes merge with cricket song. Archaeologists uncover tablets listing grain rations to workers. Economists cite them as earliest payslips. Sociologists mark them as proof that bureaucracy underpins civilization. But numbers fail to capture dusklight pooling in relief grooves, or wind scoring flute-like tunes along shattered capitals. Objective critique reminds us forced labor dug canals, soldiers died on frontier walls, and palace plots spawned rivers of fear. No empire is innocent, not even one that preaches mercy. Yet neither is any legacy singularly dark. In Persian shadow bloomed art, astronomy, ethics, trade networks, and improbable friendships across faiths. Tonight, allow these contradictions to coexist, cruelty and compassion, hubris and humility, ashes and enduring embers. As you close your eyes, picture a lone lamp flickering. The Persian stones stand not to boast, but to remind power passes. What remains is the story, and the choices those stories inspire in us. Thank you for journeying across millennia. May the calm of Persian nights settle over your thoughts, and may you carry forward the empire's most luminous gift, the courage to weave many voices into one shared future.